Hello, I'm Dr. Cécile Cosculuela. Welcome to this ESL video on English grammar. So we're working on the passive voice, and in this fourth video, we are going to look at the invariant of the passive voice, meaning when do we use the passive voice? What is it used for? What is its invariant is another way of asking the same question. So let's have a look at examples and let's see if we can draw from these examples the invariant that we're looking for. The examples are to be found in Jean-Pierre Gabilan's grammar book, Grammaire, expliquée de l'anglais, in chapter 7. So the first example, mon frère aime les frites. What would that be in English? My brother likes fries. Is this a passive voice sentence or an active voice sentence? Well, obviously it's an active voice sentence. And what's the passive voice? What's the corresponding passive voice? It would be tempting to ask. Well, that would be chips in British English or French fries in American English are liked by my brother. But would we really use such a sentence? It doesn't seem very likely. And therefore, the first point that we'd like to make is the fact that not every active sentence has a corresponding passive sentence. In the next example, let's translate it into English. L'abus de drogue provoque la perte de la mémoire. So that would be drug abuse causes loss of memory. That's again an active voice sentence. What's the passive voice corresponding to that active voice sentence? That would be loss of memory is caused by drug abuse. And we can see that obviously it doesn't have the same meaning at all as the active voice sentence. It's not two different ways of presenting the same idea. It's just two sentences which have a different meaning. Il est né le 21 juin 1986. In English, he was born on June 21st, 1986. Elle doit être née avant la Seconde Guerre mondiale. She must have been born before World War II. In these two sentences, there's no other option but to use the passive voice. And it is not possible to express these sentences with the active voice. Therefore, some verbs can only be used in the passive voice, and there is no corresponding active voice. So all these elements can help us have a clearer picture of the relationship between active and passive voices. Next example, Tom was given a watch. So it is very commonly said that sentences in the passive voice are used to refer to the cases in which the subject is undergoing an action. And in this case, Tom does not really undergo any action. It is rather the recipient of the action. An error had been committed. What does the error undergo? Well, that's a question that doesn't even make sense. The error resulting from whatever was done, from whatever had been committed. And therefore, we can see from these two instances that the subject of the passive voice does not necessarily undergo the action. Conversely, in these sentences, which are in which voice? He received a deadly blow. Jane Cameron suffered a black eye. I feel cold. This is obviously the active voice. Are we going to consider that the subject is really active in these sentences? He received a deadly blow. She suffered a black eye. I feel cold. The subject is not really active. It rather looks like the subject is undergoing the action, and yet these sentences are active sentences. In example D, page 175 of La Grammaire expliquée de l'anglais, same question. Mistakes have been made. What do the mistakes undergo? Well, it doesn't really make sense to ask that question, and therefore we can conclude that it is not because the sentence is an active sentence that the subject is active. And whenever a sentence is passive, it doesn't mean either that the subject of the passive sentence is undergoing the action. Okay, so these remarks are to be found page 175 of the Grammaire expliquée de l'anglais de Jean-Pierre Gabilan, and they help us get a clearer, more global picture of what the passive voice is. And also, we take a step back from the traditional views. Therefore, when, in what circumstances are we going to choose to say a sniper shot the president, and when are we going to say the president was shot by a sniper? So we'll come back to these two questions, and I'll let you think about it for now. Okay? In the meantime, let's have a look at an example which is a little long, but it really is interesting, so let's have a look at it. You can find it in La Grammaire expliquée de l'anglais. It's example A, page 177. English couple murdered on Greek island. So let's read it quickly. And so if you've been working on the Grammaire expliquée de l'anglais, you've already read it. And you can start thinking of why do we have the verb forms that we have in this paragraph? Okay, so a couple who left Britain only 5 months ago for a dream retirement on the peaceful Greek island of Cephalonia have been found murdered in their villa. Roy Eclas, 55, an electrical engineer from St. Neots, Cambridgeshire, and his wife Judith, 49, an accountant, were found with multiple knife wounds by a worried English neighbor late on Thursday night when they failed to answer that telephone, etc., etc. And so already in this paragraph, we can see that we have these verb forms that are interesting. Have been found here, were found. Let's focus on these two. So have been found, what tense is this? And were found, same question, what tense and what voice? So have been found, as you can see, is the present perfect in the passive voice. Okay, can you see be plus ven here? That's the formula for the passive voice. And we can see it here as well. This is be plus ven, and this time it is associated with ved, yes, ved, the past tense, sorry. The past tense here. So maybe before we ask ourselves why the passive form appears here, we can ask ourselves, why do we have the past tense here and why do we have the present perfect here? And the answer to that question is the fact that were found is associated with a marker that lets us know that we're focusing on a point in the past. And that marker is late on Thursday night. Okay, so late on Thursday night is the marker that shows that the speaker, the narrator, is focusing on a point in the past Thursday night. And therefore, it means that this is completely out of phase and expressed with the past tense. Whereas we do not have any such marker for the first verb form here, have been found. And this is much more about taking stock of the situation. And we're focusing on the present moment. And from that standpoint, we're looking at what happened before in the recent past. Okay? So now, yes, why do we have the passive voice? Why do we have the active voice? Well, in either case, actually, whether we choose to use the active voice as here in left or there, they failed. These two verbs are in the active voice and these two verbs are in the passive voice. And what's the point that they have in common? Well, as you can see here highlighted in yellow, the point they have in common is the fact that this paragraph is all about this English couple. So what we're interested in is this English couple, the couple, Roy and Judith, his wife. They. So all these mentions show us that this is our subject, our theme, the topic we're interested in. And this is why we focus on this topic. And from that perspective, then we have to use either the active voice or the passive voice. So what we have chosen is the subject that we are interested in. And this, once we choose the subject we're interested in, then the active or passive voices are just automatic in a way. So yes, and the other markers, so on Thursday night I mentioned earlier on, and then ago here, which is why we have the past tense here. So past tenses and present perfect tenses, and as you remember, all these actions are completely in the past. So this is an action that's completely in the past, and so are all the other actions here that are in a yellow square. And when we use the past tense, that's because we're completely disconnected from what we're talking about. That's just a point in the past and we are out of phase with that event. So we use the past tense. Whereas when we're focusing on the present moment, and we look at what happened before that moment, then we are making an interconnection between these 2 points, and that's when we need to use the present perfect here. Just like when we said they have been found, the couple have been found, because what really matters is the fact that we can say now that they have been found murdered. They have been murdered before. And this distinction between the cases in which we use the past tense and the cases in which we use the present perfect is really important, and we have already worked on them in another video in which we have been looking at a few examples that you have to keep in mind in order to use them as models from which to deal with all the other cases in which you need to understand this difference between the choice between the past tense and past tense here again and the present perfect. Okay, so that's this really important difference. And as regards the use of the active voice and the passive voice, the main thing really is that we choose the subject we're interested in, and the choice of the topic of the theme determines the choice of the voice. That's what we can see also in the next really interesting example that I'll let you read for yourself. It's example B, page 178, in which we follow a character through a walkway, and then he reaches or he reached a door, and then he does this and he does that, and then we're looking at the door when it was opened. So it's really completely logical in that discourse that we should be focusing on the door and not on the woman who opened it. So in this narration here, it wouldn't make sense at all to say, and an old woman opened the door, because that doesn't have any reason for being. What's logical here is to talk about the door, and therefore, once we have chosen the subject, the topic, the theme, then the choice of the voice is automatic. Let's go on to the next example. Actually, there are a number of really interesting examples in the Grammaire expliquée de l'anglais. This next one here it is really interesting because on top of having the passive voice, it also has the be plus ing form. And yes, I'm thinking maybe I'm gonna let you read this paragraph and we will deal with it in the next video, so you can take a little break because we have been working already on quite a few things. So I'll see you in the next video, and we'll be dealing with the be plus ing form when it is associated with the passive voice. I'll see you in the next video.